I've fallen asleep 3 times on my journey home, one in front of Crofty while he was talking to me.
No way.
You should never bet on whatever I've put my money on.
We can't keep flip-flopping in this. He's out. Oh, he's in again.
Bernie Collins advocating for 50 Shades of Grey.
The beatings will continue until morale improves.
There's your headline. Hello everybody, welcome to the F1 show sponsored by Audi following the Brazilian Grand Prix and a Brazilian Grand Prix weekend where Lando Norris, it would be fair to say, made his championship move. A net gain of 23 points on his teammate. He now leads the way by 24 with 3 races and a sprint to go. Delighted to say I am joined by Bernie Collins, who is at Silverstone, not at her new house in Scotland. Are you there? Why are you at Silverstone, Bernie?
I'm at Silverstone. I'm doing a partner event today, and some people are currently having fun going around the track, and then I'm going to talk to them about data afterwards.
Brilliant. Oh, well, we'll be quick then. And Ted, who's there once again in his what's becoming perhaps the most famous spare room in the whole of the country, certainly in F1 circles.
Hello, Simon. Hello, Bernie. Hello. Welcome back. The trio return. And Bernie, we've got one over Simon already because 6 words into the podcast, he's misnamed the race that we've just come back from. It's all right, Simon.
Sao Paulo. I did it, but you did it as well. But you do it on purpose, though.
I do it on purpose. I do it on purpose.
Favourite.
It is my favourite, and I do it on purpose. Not even when I found myself strangely presenting the show for some reason or other. Even then, when I'm meant to be a proper presenter, I end up saying, "Hello, welcome to not the Brazilian Grand Prix, the Sao Paulo Grand Prix." So, a busy weekend and one that I'm still slightly recovering from.
Yeah,
we're quite a shock.
I'm sorry for my. Was it a shock?
Yeah, I was watching, I got into watching was expecting to see someone different. Then there was Ted, presenting qualifying.
I have that effect on most people.
I got stuck in Lisbon with some Portuguese sailors, but I got there in the end. Like Vasco da Gama, I made my way over to Brazil. And I got there late. But anyway, got there just in time to catch the major action. And the major action, the sprint's one thing. Let's just get into Lando's weekend, the championship weekend to start with, if we could, Ted, because the perfect weekend for Lando, the not so perfect weekend for Oscar. And as I mentioned, it felt like, okay, here's the move from Lando. What have you got, Oscar? The net gain of 23 points, and it's going to be tricky for the others now.
Well, what have you got, Oscar? You've got a crash, you've got an okay qualifying, and then you've got a penalty. So I don't think the penalty probably was his fault, although I thought it was interesting Andrea Stella mentioned the penalty in terms of we have to work with Oscar about his execution. So maybe Andrea Stella, quite a hard taskmaster, I think it's fair to say, as the McLaren boss, saying, look, Oscar, maybe don't get yourself in that situation. I mean, we'll get on to the penalty later because I find the whole thing depressing. But yeah, Lando was, as you say, Simon, absolutely perfect, did what he needed to do, and has found his pace in the McLaren at the right time. He's peaked at the perfect time, 2 in a row.
And now he doesn't need Bernie to win another because the lead is 24, and if he took second in all of those, including the sprint, 22 is the nearest end that Oscar can get to him from there. So that kind of lead now is just so important. It gives him options, doesn't it? And means that perhaps he doesn't need to take unnecessary risks.
Yeah, what you said there, he's hauled it back. And it's interesting when I started to look at some of the numbers from this weekend. Obviously, this weekend was a big haul of points for Lando Norris versus not that many for Oscar Piastri. So it made a big difference in that championship position. But I think he's outscored Oscar Piastri every race since Baku. So it was Monza, the race before that was the last one that Piastri actually outscored Lando Norris. So he's been chipping away at that lead. Then he's overtaken it, and now he's made a big bold step forward. In the sprint weekend allowed the additional points to make that happen as well. But he will feel a lot more comfortable now. And it's interesting, this back and forth that the drivers have had. There's been this period where Oscar Piastri should have felt more comfortable, and then it's sort of fallen away from it. Norris has been the one that's had everything to gain by taking those risks. now it's swung around again. You know, we've got 3 really interesting races coming up, still another sprint on the cards. So can Oscar Piastri feel a bit more comfortable now, set back a little bit, knowing that he you know, he's got to go for it? What can he gain? And we've seen, obviously, as Ted says, we get on to the penalty, but we've seen a bit more fighting spirit in this race than we have in those last 5 or 6 where he's not necessarily scored the points as well.
Yeah, I mean, Lando, it's the way he's chipped away at it. He's still quite sensitive, isn't he, about what people have been saying about him. And he's also, we're going to come on to the shots that have been fired at Ferrari, but he's been very sensitive about what people have been saying about him. But I do feel as if the kind of the gate post came down. Not gate post, that's the wrong word.
The shutters, the emotional shutters.
That's not a gate post. If a gate post came down, that would be painful. But the shutters came down.
They did,
and he's closed himself off to that. And even when he won this race, there has not been the elation over team radio. It's very much pragmatism, isn't it, Ted? Now, and I'm dealing with this. I'm going to stay completely level-headed, and I'm going to ignore the external noise, and I'm just continue doing what I'm doing. And whether he likes it or not, with regards to momentum and saying he doesn't believe in it, he has got it, and he's got it at the right time.
Yeah, I'm not a great psychologist, so I don't really understand why why Lando doesn't want to portray too many happy emotions. I guess he's just using it as a focus mechanism to get himself to the end of the season. He knows that this is his best chance. He knows how well he's turned it around from the Zandvoort oil pipe points loss, and just doesn't want to get ahead of himself too soon. What that does mean for some people is, could you not look happier, Lando? But I think that we've got to let him do what he wants to do. And we've seen plenty of, smiley bits. And I think he just gets sort of a bit tired of all the post-race shenanigans. Certainly when I saw him on the notebook at the end for the photo, he came and waved to the crowd once, and then there were a few smiles when they did the photo, but then it was a bit kind of, let's get on with it. I think it was a tiring weekend for him as well. It's tiring to be perfect, Simon, as you well know, presenting the program. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it, because it's very hard work, and I don't want to do it again. My brain was fried at the end of it. Many things are explained, Bernie.
My brain's permanently fried. You know
that's
that.
what I mean. That's what I mean. This profession you've chosen for yourself. And so when it gets to the end of it, I think he was just a little bit kind of, okay, let me refresh. He's just thinking about Qatar now, and then he's just thinking about Las Vegas, with Qatar being the earliest he can win it, possibly. But I think he might have a harder time in Las Vegas, dominating the way he did in Brazil. But we will see.
I think he's come out this week already and said that he's not looking forward to Las Vegas, hasn't he? That the car hasn't done well there in the past. So, if we talk about momentum, if we talk about upper hand, if the car's not doing well and if it's a struggle, it's a bit more of a lottery who comes out on top of that one between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. And if neither of them score points, well, that would benefit Lando Norris, really, in the fact that if the car's not good enough. But I don't think it's going to be that far off. So it's just who can make the best of it. But Oscar's got to feel, with the points gap, like you say, Simon, that you need something big to start to crawl this back, to start to get it, because the races are going to go pretty quickly now. The opportunities for scoring points are going to run out pretty quickly. So it will be interesting to see who can get on top of the car best in Las Vegas, which will be tricky for both of the McLarens.
Okay, well, let's get into Oscar's weekend now, because there is a school of thought that was extremely unlucky in the sprint to hit that water that had been thrown up by his teammate on turn 3 and spin. And then the 10-second penalty was extremely unlucky. Ted, you've already alluded to it. I think we analysed it in presentation, and Jamie was really strong on it and felt that he was hard done by. And Karun, his mind was switched, I think, on it, because in race you can understand, can't you, why the stewards would have called it one way. You got the puff of the lockup, and his front axle wasn't exactly alongside the mirrors of Kimi Antonelli as we got to the apex. However, was there enough mitigating circumstances, do you think, there? Jamie said that he felt that he was in control, but I've looked at a couple of traces. since then, which if he had braked later or at the same time as Kimi Antonelli and as hard as that, maybe actually it would have been a different decision and he would have been further enough alongside to have taken control of that corner and perhaps he wouldn't have locked up in the way that he did. What do you think?
Well, I mean, for me, it was that Kimi Antonelli was on the same line as Lando Norris, which was something that Charles Leclerc pointed out, was that Kimi didn't give him much room. And I just wanted to know what really was the harm for the stewards, not that there was an overtake, but it led to a collision with Leclerc. And that kind of secondary collision, while I understand it, I think is a bit nebulous. And I think if we start going down that road, then we're in a bit of trouble with racing. And I think that is the problem. I can't remember who it was. I think it was an article in a magazine who said, is this going to lead to the end of racing as we know it? That drivers are going to be dissuaded or discouraged from doing these moves lest they get a penalty. And I think that's an interesting route to go down, and one that we've got to be very careful about, because not only is it going to put enough doubt in the driver's mind as to whether to go for something which might be a 50-50 or they just have to go for it. I don't think it was a 50-50. I think it was an absolute pass. It's a definite pass from Piastri. Are they going to go for it, or they're not going to go for it? And if they're not going to go for it, then we've got a problem. Then that's going to turn people off. So we've got to be really careful about it. It was the definite. I mean, I said it at the time. It was a definition of a racing incident. Yes, it put Charles Leclerc out. Yes, but there was Kimi Antonelli in there as well. Do we have to have... Listen, you get penalised for breaking wind these days by the penalties. So I said it rather more delicately on the TV. But I don't like it. It's over-regulation that's killing the racing, Simon, and I've been saying that for years.
I think we're all agreed that about consistency, and we keep coming back to it. I mean, how many times have we discussed stewards' consistency? And I know they're trying their best to iron things out, but we come back to it year in, year out. Why, when that one wasn't that one, etc., 10-seconder or blah, 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 blah. However, just very quickly on the championship context, that potentially cost him at least 8 points, at least going perhaps wheel to wheel with his teammate in the final, in the closing stages of that race. And so Oscar Piastri is going to be thinking at the end of this weekend, what have I got to do to arrest this slide? Because he was hard done by, I think, this weekend. I think we all agree on that.
Yeah, I think, watching it from home, you're sat going, we really hope he doesn't get a penalty, because for the championship would be much better without him having a penalty, and he's not going to claw it back in that race. So we want it to be as close as possible as we can going into the last 3 races. Now, that's not the reason that Stewart should or should not give a penalty. I sort of agree with Ted. We've got these driving standards. They look at where the axles are relative to each other. I understand the logistics of all of that, but actually, sometimes things cannot be written black and white, and that's very difficult for an engineer to say. Some things cannot be written in black and white. Some things there have to be a sort of pragmatic look at it, what's happening. If you look at Oscar in turn 1 again, other drivers in a similar situation would just not have braked, not have had the lockup, not have braked, went a bit further into the corner, been alongside, and then had the corner. What Oscar tried to do is probably the more natural reaction of realising that Kimi wasn't quite giving him enough room and trying to avoid the collision. So I think Oscar's tried to avoid the collision and therefore left himself in a position where he looks wholly at fault because he's not alongside, rather than ignoring the fact that there's going to be collision, keeping alongside Kimi Antonelli, and then it being viewed as a racing incident. So unfortunately, because we tried to write everything in black and white, we now have the situation where I think potentially Oscar trying to do the right thing, in inverted commas, has meant that he's got a penalty. So, it's interesting what Ted says, and Andrea Stella said, we're going to look at what you would do in future. I think his only option in future, his 2 options in future are pull out of it much, much earlier. I don't even go for the overtake, which when you're trying to close down a championship just isn't happening, or keep in it and be alongside at the apex, and then force either a recent incident or force it to being Kimi's fault for not giving you enough room on the inside. And, either of those two may not have resulted in a 10-second penalty for Oscar Piastri. One of them, he wouldn't have gained any positions, and one of them, he probably would have gained 2 positions and not had a 10-second penalty. But the one that gains 2 positions is much more dangerous for racing on track. And that's the position that we're in from a driving standards point of view. And I get that we tried to standardise it, we tried to write it down, and it's because people like us are like beating up the stewards saying we need some sort of standardisation. And now that we've got that, it's not quite working. And I think we've discussed this so many times over the last 2 years, why the rules are as they are, what we can do to make it better. And I think it needs a good long hard look over the winter to sort of see what we're going to do next year.
There's your headline, isn't it? Less black and white, Bernie Collins advocating for 50 Shades of Grey.
Always, Simon, always. That's your headline. Thank you for making that.
There's your headline. With regards to what you were saying, though, last podium, Monza. Okay, before that, Oscar Piastri had 13 podiums out of 15, including 7 wins. So it is a slide. It's whatever it is. They've been saying about low grip tracks are not suiting him, and at the moment, Lando's just coping with the pressure a little bit. Whatever it's probably a combination of many things. But I'm just intrigued to see, because if he turns it around from here, what a turnaround it would be, Ted.
Yeah, I mean, it's only 24 points, and I take your point about Lando not having to win, but that's not the way Lando's working at the moment. He's going out there to qualify on pole and then to win. You know, both Mexico and Sao Paulo, as I said to Seb Vettel on Thursday, were quite Vettel-esque in the way that he did it. All right, in Brazil, he had to work through some more sort of strategy permutations to make the two-stop work and actually, you know, give it more than Mexico against a incredible performance by Max Verstappen. So I don't know. He'll have to do something special, Oscar, and hope that some weird thing happens to Lando, because Lando's absolutely found his form. He knows he's found out how to drive the car. They've revolutionized the car's handling, and I think Oscar knows he's up against it. And I don't know. I can't really see a situation where he'd be able to beat Lando on pure pace on the evidence of Mexico and Brazil, especially when you've got Las Vegas in there, when McLaren don't tend to be feeling like they're going to have the pace of some other people. I don't know. I mean, just maybe the final word on the stewards is that, you know, it's not the stewards' job. They did their job correctly with the guidelines that they've got. I just think it's a wider topic of over-regulation, which is something that we need, but I don't know when we're going to have that. And I think all the drivers need to agree and all the teams need to agree, which is next to impossible.
Final one on that, Bernie. I remember we did an event in Ireland, didn't we, back in the springtime? And you and Crofty both tipped Oscar Piastri. Karun changed from Lando to Oscar, but some of us stuck with Lando. It's going to be interesting, isn't it? I think, have we got another tenner on that? Where's your money now, Bernie?
Well, I think I can't change where my money's at this late stage of the season. I think I'm going to have to stick with it. But, you know, I did say, Oscar, I said that the run of form was looking really strong there. Equally, Simon, if we're being really brutal about my expectation for the end of the season, I had not Max Verstappen in there anywhere. So that's proven quite badly wrong. Because he just seems to come from anywhere in the grid and has really got the car under him now. So I think what we're saying is you should never bet on whatever I've put my money on.
Well, I mean, we're all just guessing anyway. Let's face it. I mean, we call ourselves experts, but some of us do, but I don't. But let's just guess anyway. Good segue, though, because it leads us on very nicely. We'll come on to Mercedes in a bit and Kimi Antonelli. But the driver of the day, overwhelmingly, was Max Verstappen. Big question, and perhaps I'm guilty of not actually asking this at the end of the race, but I should have done, is should he have stayed out on those mediums? Could he have won that race? Comes in late. I think we saw he was being closed down, wasn't he, by the McLarens, and perhaps they felt, and they know better than we do, but they felt that they weren't going to be able to close out the win and have a fight on those. But it is a legitimate question, isn't it? But nevertheless, it's still a headline drive from the master, Ted.
We didn't see, I want to ask the strategist here because I hope she's going to support or recognise what I saw and felt. So I don't think we saw people going off the cliff, but the cliff was there, and there were some people who got quite near to the cliff, by which I mean, of course, the tyre cliff. There was quite a lot of degradation. It was quite bad. The teams are on top of it by now, and we didn't get to see anyone near the cliff. But they could see it coming, and Red Bull got Max off those tyres before they went off the cliff, and he would have been easy meat for Lando if he'd stayed out on the what we're calling a one stop, but obviously was a two because Max was forced into an early stop because of a puncture. So I think it was the. Maybe he might have been able to hang on to second, but the cliff was there, and I think Red Bull did the right thing. Bernie, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think if we look at some of the data that's out there, I think the only one that really did anything that showed the cliff was Lawson. Lawson did effectively.
He was managing though, wasn't he?
He stopped on lap 19, but then the second half looked terrible in terms of pace. He managed to stay ahead of some people, but it was not a pretty race. I think Red Bull stopped Max because they protected from the undercut threat potentially from Piastri, and I think they thought that Norris was going to go by anyway, and then he could have got Kimi Antonelli at the end. So I think they'll feel disappointed that they either didn't go sooner on the soft, or that they didn't get Kimi Antonelli right at the end. But Kimi Antonelli seemed to manage his tyres and then, really hold on to them at the end. So they were playing that risk-free reward. Could they hold on to P1? Thought they would get P2. I think they'll feel a bit hard done by that they didn't get back to that P2 position. But I think they thought, like you said, Ted, that P1 was probably not going to be able to be held on to.
Lawson, just a point, Lawson was being protected by Hülkenberg, who was also on the one-stop tyre preservation and was managing, and then had Hadjar behind him. And I don't know whether Hadjar was told not to get Lawson, but finished 0.2 of a second behind him, did Isaac Hadjar. And I think Racing Bulls shut that one down. So I think Lawson, Bernie's right, did get cliffside and was, I don't know. Listen, it would have been fun to see it, wouldn't it? It would have been a bit more fun to see Verstappen hold out. He might have just ended up with a third as well. But would it mean, I just wonder, when are we going to get onto Red Bull and the engineers? Because I just wonder whether they were in sort of disaster recovery mode after their own mistake and thought, let's not make any more mistakes. They'd already made a mistake with the wrong way on setup. Okay, it was a risk worth trying, but as Lauren McKee said, it was our bad, and they just didn't want to make any more mistakes, and keeping him out, getting to a tyre cliff, and then ending up losing the place to Russell as well might have been, adding insult to injury, really.
I think I'm right in saying, though, there was probably only a 6 or 7 lap offset on the mediums, because the set that Lando had on were 12 laps old or something like that. So actually, they weren't that much newer than Max's. So I don't know. Maybe they could have taken a risk. Bernie, was it? I mean, was it tight as far as you're concerned?
I think that was the only opportunity for them to do it, because Piastri had pitted. If they left it any later, they would end up coming out behind Piastri. So that was their decision point, I think. I think from that side, they've done the right thing. We didn't see the hard start tire play out for Verstappen, really, because he boxed because there was a puncture, if I was right in what I picked up from that. And that, when you look at some of the other people that started on hard, didn't seem like a great opening strategy. But I think the decisions they made there on is probably as good as you're going to get.
Okay, on the subject of sprint weekends, though, and Red Bull and the turnaround, again, just going back to it, what was... They just went the wrong way on setup a couple of times, didn't they, Ted? And then took the opportunity. There's a little bit of discussion on our Sky F1 WhatsApp group about this gratuitous change for a new power unit, which will obviously be blamed on reliability issues or something like that, because there's been a few people saying, would that be involved in the cost cap, etc., etc. But they put it in, and that on top of getting the setup right at the end of the weekend and putting the new donkey, as Martin Brundle calls it, in the car, gave him a bit more EOR, and he was able to put it through. But it's a good it's a good advert for sprint weekends, putting an extra layer of jeopardy into it, isn't it?
Well, it is, but Red Bull will be going away, and I saw not only Laura McKees but also GP Lambiase, Max's engineer, after the race, and they looked about as not wanting to celebrate as Lando Norris. They didn't look glum. They just looked like, that we got a lot to learn from this weekend. And we've seen the Red Bull often take on normal Grand Prix weekends, probably until qualifying 3 sometimes, to get the setup absolutely perfect. But it just looks like, going back on it, I think they'll probably reflect that they overreacted to one problem, which was Max in sprint qualifying and the sprint race, saying this is nowhere really. The ride is terrible. I'm not really feeling it. Overreacted to that with a setup change and mixing up some parts from Austin and the Mexico upgrade. That was the wrong choice. They in trying to solve one problem, they made a much bigger problem. But in the end, going back on that problem created them and gave them this amazing car that they can use for their data banks in the future. It's like they know now the combination of stuff which worked in Brazil might be very useful in Qatar, that particular thing. And I've got no problem with this new engine. I mean, I remember the days when people were breaking seals on stuff to change the engines and things like that, and that's absolutely fine. I don't have if it's in the cost cap or not. If people want to do a little trick to avoid that, I've got no problem with that. It's great it's a F1 common trick to just say you need a new engine, so you start at the back of the field, get a new engine, it's part of it, and then that's fresher one for the pool.
Yeah, I agree with Ted on the engine stuff. I think that anyone can decide to start from the pit lane if they want to take a new engine. But, McLaren obviously didn't feel that was the best way to get the best result on their day, or any other team didn't. So it's not what you would choose to do if you had a good position, and they make the most of an unfortunate qualifying. I think just very quickly to pick up on one thing that you mentioned, Simon, earlier, was the Oscar Piastri slide in the sprint. I don't know if any of you have seen this morning that someone's overlaid a Max Verstappen very similar start of slide that he caught, and then Oscar Piastri, and there's quite a few videos going around there, and that is Max strength, the reacting to those conditions, keeping the car on the track, and he is making the most of that. And the reason he's in the position he's in now is in the earlier part of the year when the car wasn't good enough, he was still getting points out of it. So it's great that we've been fit to see this closing down. I think, like Ted says, Red Bull have a lot to learn, and they will learn a lot from this weekend in terms of where it went wrong and what to do. And I think partially because they've come so late in the year with upgrades that they're now trying to figure out, that's what sort of got them into this sort of dark place in the earlier sessions in Brazil, because they don't have 15 races of learning on this car. Some bits of it have been quite new. But they'll bounce back. They're a strong team. I think there was a few little mistakes, like the not serving the 10-second penalty for Yuka Tsunoda. That's got to hurt, because that's just pure operational, isn't it? So there's more things to worry them than just the setup of Verstappen's car, which I think they could find maybe good reason why it was the way it was.
Yeah, the irony is he puts in a drive like that, and he's probably out of the championship now, even by Max's standards, isn't he? 49 points. It would take a miracle. No. You don't think he is? You think he's still in? Of course not.
Yeah, he's definitely still in. Of course not. Come on. Of course he's still in. He's okay.
Well, mathematically he's in, and it's Max. So
exactly. And we can't keep flip-flopping on this, can we? We can't keep flip-flopping on this. He's out. Oh, he's in again. Oh, he's now out. I'm still a step behind with the Max is definitely still in the championship stuff. So let's stay with that. Otherwise I'll get confused.
All right. Okay. Well, we hope he is, because, Max zeroing in on like that for the last 3 and a bit races. I'm calling a sprint a bit of a race, because it is a bit of a race. It's the third of a race. So let's choose that. Mercedes, second and fourth. Kimi holding off Max at the end was good to see. I mean, there was a quarter of a second between them at the end, and half a second between George Russell and Oscar Piastri. So both of them going defensive. But let's start with Kimi, Bernie, and watching from afar, and the way that all of a sudden, it was really interesting, actually. Me and Karun were talking to Pete Bonington, Uncle Pete, or Uncle Bono, as I think he's getting called now, has a little arm round Kimi most of the time. But he did say that after Monza, he gave him a. He said, "Look, I'm very I only occasionally give him. It's a podcast. We can call it that. He only occasionally does he give him a, but he did so after Monza, and it gave him the kick up the backside. And ever since then, he's showing signs. He says all the little things now. It's very small things that they're working on, and that list is getting less and less, and he is making fewer errors. And certainly, you can see that on track, can't you?"
Yeah, I think you can. We had a fantastic weekend. He's sort of had a few weekends that's been clearly on the up. Big points scored this weekend across the race and the sprint make a big difference to him. And I can't really imagine Bono telling anyone
No, I
off, but
can't.
I'm sure it does happen. He's always quite friendly. And I don't ever call him Ultimate Bono, but maybe we'll bring that in as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that he's worked with a lot of experience, and he and Kimi's got to realise that when Bono's telling you something, Bono's saying, I think this is the way to go, or I think this is what we need to improve on, and this is what we need to work on, you've got to take on board that experience. You've got to really use it to your advantage. And, he has used it to turn around the end of the season, and finishing the season on the high will make a big, big difference going into next year. But yeah, fantastic points for Kimi, and I think good to see Verstappen close him down. Good to see him holding his position there and holding him off.
It's wonderful to see him maturing, isn't it? That's the thing, Ted. We said at the beginning of this season what a joy he is and what a breath of fresh air. And now you're just seeing the signs of a really talented driver beginning to recognise his potential.
Yes, I don't know if the rollicking, should I call it, Simon, for a family show, should be down to a... Kimi should be able to do it himself without a kind of telling off from. I'd like to call him Big Brother Bono, because the Otmar, the uncle Otmar,
he's
has already been
taken. Well, that's for us. He's
uncle has already been. Otmar looks like your uncle. Bono doesn't look like my uncle. He's too young. He looks like my bigger brother. So
Otmar looks like Peter Griffin. Yeah, but there we are. But we do call him Otmar.
So we're Uncle Otmar. Yeah, it just fits. I don't know. I mean, I said to Toto, has Kimi Antonelli come of age? I did quite like who said, well, I don't know. I don't understand that English phrase. But yeah, I mean, I think Kimi and maybe Bono himself would say, it's about time that we had this weekend where he's ahead of George in all competitive sessions. And it's a mark of how good George has been this year that there haven't been many of those weekends, really. And so I think when he does have one of those weekends, as teammates often do, in all teams, then we're saying, he's suddenly sort of come of age, is fantastic and whatever. But Mercedes will want to be seeing more of these weekends, more of these kind of weekends into next year, which I'm sure they will.
Yeah. What interests me, though, is actually if you fast forward it to 2026, and let's just assume that Mercedes come out the box quicker than anybody else. Kimi, we look at Oscar, it's year 3, and he's been challenging most of the year and still is for the championship. Do you think that he could push George closer next year if indeed there is a championship on the line? And would they be on equal footing?
I don't know about equal footing. I think that George will always feel he's got the upper hand in terms of experience within that team, at least. I think Mercedes are generally pretty even-handed, I think, with how they make decisions and how they go racing. Kimi having one full year under the belt and getting over some of the disappointment of this year, or some of the things that he struggled with, some of the struggles of this year, will definitely help. But he will be fit to push George. And I think what's important for Mercedes is if both drivers are pushing each other, that is the best way to develop a car. And that is the best way to get the best feedback. If one driver retires, you're still getting good feedback from the other car, etc., etc. So I think that it's needed for Mercedes next year, because although we all believe that the Mercedes engine is going to be the best, obviously that engine is also in the McLaren. So I think that the Mercedes-McLaren battle might be the big one next year. I don't really have anything that tells me Mercedes are definitely on top of that over McLaren when you see McLaren's car performance currently. But But two drivers within a team that are pushing each other really hard in every session is what you need to develop a car in a new breed of regulation. And that will really help both Mercedes and McLaren, I think.
Let's also not forget that George had overheating brakes. So there might be some performance there that he wasn't able to get to from the Mercedes. But we're all expecting the integration between power unit and chassis to be important. That's the only place, I guess, Mercedes would have over McLaren Mercedes or Williams Mercedes, for that matter, I suppose. And then you've got the genius of Newey with a Honda engine. So yeah, it all remains to be seen. I mean, apparently drivers are going to be doing so much work to be more like playing computer games, which might be advantageous to the younger generation, Simon, with their skills on the old computer games buttons. No, George is a seasoned campaigner. He'll be fine next year. An interesting fight for next year between those two.
Yeah, it will be, won't it? But Mercedes up to second now, and let me do some maths, 32 ahead of Red Bull. Who in turn are 4 ahead of Ferrari, who've dropped a couple of places. And as I mentioned, some shots fired from John Elkann, the Ferrari president. So we shall discuss that momentarily. Quick word on our show partner, Audi. The philosophy of Audi Sport isn't just about winning races. It's about pushing boundaries. Everything learnt on the track goes straight into Audi's road cars, making them just as thrilling as they are refined. Take the Audi RS range, serious performance, but with a level of sophistication and refinement that doesn't need to be loud to make a statement. It's that perfect blend of power and precision wrapped in quiet luxury. Whether it's their powerful style or the RS sports suspension with Quattro all-wheel drive for razor-sharp handling, Audi is constantly redefining the future of performance. Book a test drive today to experience the Audi RS range for yourself. Right, you two. Ferrari, discuss. We had a weekend where they scored 6 points in the sprint and then a double DNF. I think Charles was unlucky, obviously. Lewis, perhaps a little less so. But a double DNF for Ferrari, which, as I said, has dropped them down to 4th. And it's led to the Ferrari president, John Elkann, in a Milan event, basically name-check Ferrari's win in the World Endurance Championship, that title in Bahrain. He said, whenever everyone gets together, great things can be achieved. The rest not up to par. We have drivers who need to focus on driving and talk less. Think more about Ferrari and less about themselves. Now, let's ignore the balance of performance rule, perhaps, from the World Endurance Championship. But it's forced Lewis to come out and say, look, after having said, between the dream of driving for this team and the nightmare of results, it's challenging. Then you get the grenade from Elkann, and he said, immediately, I back my team, I back myself, I will not give up, not now, not then, not ever. Thank you, Brazil, always. So is this a spark or a slap, do you think, from John Elkann? Because when it comes from the top, I mean, it's happened before. I seem to remember Arriva Bene doing it to Sebastian Vettel, was it? Back in 2016, he said something about just, stick to driving or whatever it was. We know it's politically charged, but what was the message? What's that message from Elkann, do you think? That's an open question. Ted, do you want to start us?
I think it was more that can we just please focus on not dropping down to 4th in the constructors and getting back into 2nd or even 3rd. It's a mark of how Ferrari are now judging their season as to where they finish in the constructors. 2nd would be success. It would be okay. They could rely on that. That's cold hard points and data, and they could say that look, we have the 2nd quickest car. It's all not so bad. Okay, we didn't win a race, but it's all okay. But let's not forget that the people who got Ferrari to 2nd in the constructors were Charles and Lewis, because they were just plugging in the points. And let's not forget that this car has a fundamental flaw in it that the Belgium upgrade wasn't able to correct in terms of the plank and not being able to run the car low and not being able to find a fix around. So it's the drivers who've been getting the points in, and then now for Elkann to publicly single them out. I mean, the drivers have got broad shoulders. Lewis did that message on social media saying, I'll always try, keeping going. Did you notice Charles Leclerc put one out as well? So they were putting out a sort of a united front saying, look, we're only thinking of the best of the team. And that's clearly what the drivers are. They're not just thinking about, when Elkan says, I think it's fine for Elkan to say what he wants. He's the president of the team. But to say that the drivers should think less of themselves and more about the team, the drivers are thinking about the team. Of course they're thinking about the team. Lewis is thinking about the team when he says that, he wants to make things better and it's going to make him more performant. Charles is thinking about the team, saying, yes, some of the things that Lewis is pointing out, I felt about for quite a long time in the team, and we need to improve. They're all looking to improve. So I don't know. Maybe they caught Elkan at a position where he'd seen a double DNF. It's the worst for a team. Nobody likes to see a double DNF. That's obvious. Whether Elkan will come to think that his comments were a bit strong, I don't know, but the drivers are clearly, Lewis is being open about it, but what's Lewis going to say? And what's Charles going to say? Oh, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. It's okay. No one's going to buy that. So they can only say, you can't deny what's happening.
Back in the day, that sort of brains trust that was protecting Michael Schumacher sort of insulated them, I suppose, from the top level criticism. But this is Ferrari. This is a national team, effectively. And, the pressure cooker of that obviously is going to have an effect on people. But I do take your point that of course they're thinking of the team, but they are drivers and they will, first things first. You can tell us, Bernie, most of them, don't they think, me first, team. I don't know. Maybe I'm being cynic.
No. I totally agree, Simon. Drivers, F1 drivers in particular, are fundamentally selfish people. That's how they score points. They're out to score points for them. They're out to get the Drivers' Championship. That's why we talk about it so much when McLaren try and get them to do the team thing. But both drivers' intention was not to DNF on Sunday. On Sunday, the team points and their points were aligned. Maximum points for either was what they were after. I'm reminded of quite a few things when we're talking about this sort of situation, but there used to be a saying when you were in the garage, the beatings will continue until morale improves. And that's a bit the situation, isn't it? It's like, and what has that gained Ferrari? Not a lot. And a few weeks ago, we were talking about the statistic where I think it was McLaren or Ferrari haven't won a Constructors' Championship in 19 years or something. Charles Leclerc and Lewis had not been there that long, either of those. So there's something else fundamentally when you look at the investment Ferrari put in and what they're getting out in terms of championship points. As a team, as a construction, Fred's making changes. We can see changes within Ferrari happening, slowly, let's say. But the drivers fundamentally want to score as much points as they can. They both want to win. Lewis doesn't want to be the Ferrari driver who's not had a podium for the longest in his first season with Ferrari. He doesn't want to have a winless year. None of those things they want to happen. And I can't believe that they're such at loggerheads within the team that they're not pushing the team or the engineering forward. So I think I bit on Ted's point. I think he was, hopefully, got at the wrong moment and didn't quite choose his words as well as he would used to. It's a bit like everyone needs to focus on their bit, get their bit to the absolute maximum it can be. And I hope that's sort of more what he meant, that everyone needs to be working on their section of the car, their bit, and getting the most out of it in order to try and promote the points. But it was a horrendous weekend for Ferrari, really, when you look at the points that they came away with and finishing fourth in the Constructors. When you look at the pairings of the other two teams, Kimi Antonelli, we've just discussed, hasn't been doing as well as he would have ideally been doing in the middle section of the year. And the second driver for Ferrari or for Red Bull consistently not scoring points. Then Ferrari with two strong drivers to finish fourth doesn't look great from a championship point of view. And that's what they'll be hoping, as Ted says, that second should be their aim for the season, given the pairings in the other two cars, but the car's not been up to it.
Elkan's right about it's not the mechanics. The Ferrari mechanics been doing a great job. Pit stops have been great. The setup of the car's been great. They've been absolutely fine. So Elkan's need or desire to protect the engineers, especially after they came up with a car that wasn't good enough and haven't made it into a car that's good enough, is an interesting thing. And I think the one that merits a bit more thought as what is it that's reached the top from John Elkann that just wants to protect the engineers. I don't mean the engineers on site; they're the only ones they're just the ones who are making do with the best they can. But they changed the suspension, didn't they, of this year's Ferrari? They went down quite a different design route, even though it was the last year in a rule cycle. And you had Loic Serra joining there, the setup man, the tyres guy from Mercedes, and he hasn't really managed to make it work. Maybe he wouldn't say, well, that's not my area of expertise. But whatever it is, and there have been rumours over the years, over the season, haven't there, Simon, about what it is at the back of the Ferrari that's not quite right, that's led to this ride height problem that they haven't managed to fix. But what is it that Elkann needs to protect from the engineering point about that? Maybe it's because they're just trying to make do with what they've got, and they're hoping to motivate them to a better 2026. It's the only thing I can think of.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? And maybe it's assuaging some concerns of shareholders, et cetera, because this is Ferrari, as I mentioned there. If this carries on into 2026, heads are going to roll, aren't they? They just will, because they haven't been able to do it, as you said. You have to stretch all the way back to 2007 with Kimi, for example, and they want a driver's title. Nothing less than that will sate Maranello, the Scuderia, the Tifosi, everybody involved in red. They need to start winning championships again. And Fred got an extension to his contract. They make the marquee signing. Elkann brings in Hamilton, and then they have a season like this where they finish fourth. Fourth is not second, as you said, Bernie. Right? So something's got to change. It's got to change in early 2026. Or can you see Lewis staying? What will happen? I mean, it's usually, as far as Ferrari are concerned, in recent evidence, it's usually the team principal that gets it. No one's going to answer that, are they? But I suppose my point is, let pick it up on this. If they don't have a good start to 2026, changes will be made, and maybe this is just the first sign of that. That the very top level, the top brass, are irked by this level of performance or lack of.
I don't know. Fred's not stupid. Fred's a great team principal, and he's a great racer. And I can't think of anyone better who would do that. I don't know whether Fred's completely empowered to do what he wants. Let's think about the Hamilton documents that he's been drawing up. The sort of blueprint from what he's learnt at McLaren and 12 years at Mercedes and so many world championships. And were Ferrari insulted by those documents? Did they think, well, thank you very much, but could you just drive the car? Don't
sort the ride height out.
How to check? Yeah, can you? Well,
chapter one.
But if Lewis is writing all of these documents, a kind of winning blueprint as to what it takes to be, a top line team, then how many times do Ferrari need to hear this? And why are they not listening to it? When you go back to Fernando Alonso, who left Ferrari because he said that I didn't see a team that was ready or that could win consistently. And that's, how many years ago was that Fernando left? That was 2015, it was when Seb joined 2017. So Fernando left because he said, look, Ferrari aren't in, I've seen what it takes to be a Red Bull or a Mercedes or a McLaren or whatever. And that's not what I see at Ferrari at the moment. Sebastian came in, wasn't able to turn it around, enjoyed his time being a Ferrari driver, won some races. Charles Leclerc won some races. Then they had the engine controversy, didn't they, Simon? When they reached at the end of 2018 and 2019, that was concluded in 2020, when Ferrari reached an arrangement to close off a grey area of the engine rules and the fuel flow meter and the signal aliasing and all of that, a grey area that was closed off. Ferrari were never found to have done anything illegal, but it was a grey area with a deal that was closed off with the FIA. And then since then, they haven't looked like. I mean, they've won some races here and there, but they haven't looked like putting a championship together. So it's not a new problem. Goes back to Fernando Alonso, doesn't it?
No, Alonso left at the end of 2014. But with regards to Charles Leclerc, he's had 7 podiums this year. Without that, this is entirely different because Lewis has had none. So I don't know who you think that the shots were potentially aimed at, but Elkan was so instrumental in bringing Lewis in, and maybe he just thinks, right, come on, get behind us the way we've got behind you, and don't be saying things like, it's a nightmare on the track. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just going to leave that one hanging and conclude that. However,
it was the nightmare. It was the nightmare thing that really got Elkan.
I think that was it. I think that was the word, wasn't it? It was the nightmare. But then you think about what's going with young Ollie Bearman, who's part of the Ferrari Young Driver program. And actually, it was funny enough. You think about this when you're in presentation at the end, and you see something like that from Ferrari. You just wonder, come Monday, when Ollie Bearman has put together a couple of weekends like he has, how long before everyone starts linking him to moving up to the top team? It's inevitable. It happens so quickly, as you're saying. Week to week, Ted, we can change our opinions dependent on the results because it moves so quickly. But he has absolutely done himself no harm, has he, Bernie?
Oh, he's had a few fantastic weekends, and we've seen real strength from Ollie Bearman when he stood in the car last year, just got in for those few races when he was substituting. And then he's not necessarily showing that early on this year, but he has in the last few races. So that is in stark contrast, like you say, Simon, to the weekend that Ferrari had. So not all of the troubles, as Ted's alluded to, are driver related. Some of them are car related. Some of them are the position that you end up on track. Leclerc was unfortunate. He was on for a good race result without that incident at turn one. But Ollie Bearman did really shine over the last few weekends, and he can only do what he can do on track. That's all the advertisement that he can give. But Ferrari maybe not the best at picking people up from the Haas team and putting them in the big team in that sort of way that we've been accustomed to maybe Red Bull doing in the past.
I mean, he's the next, don't want to call him the next cab off the rank, but if he continues like this, he's certainly the shop window for Ollie Bearman. You should imagine actually that there may be other teams just looking at this and saying, some errors early on, we saw that, but in recent races, much like Kimi Antonelli, they've eliminated the rookie side of things and they moved on to a different level. And actually the pace was there. I mean, realistically, in Q1 and Q2, he'll be annoyed about his lap in Q3 because it was worse, his second flying lap. It could have been further forward starting position than eighth for Ollie. And actually, he finished 29 seconds behind. And outside of the top five, all in the big four teams, that in itself was 23 seconds ahead of his nearest rival in Liam Lawson. So the car had pace all weekend, both in quali and race trim, Ted.
Yeah, a couple of things. So I think it's clear as night follows day that Ollie Bearman will eventually replace Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari. I think that's absolutely clear. Whether Charles Leclerc will stay there or not long term is a completely separate subject. But it's the Ferrari way. They did it with Charles Leclerc to farm out their juniors to a Sauber or to a Haas or to an engine customer team and then bring them in-house. Of course, that's what happened with Leclerc with Sauber, and then he came and joined Ferrari ready formed, free of his mistakes. All right, you could say Charles Leclerc held on to a couple of mistakes in his first few years at Ferrari, but doesn't make mistakes anymore, really. And that Ollie Bearman is doing that. Haas insists that they've got Bearman nailed down for 26. So I think Ferrari will let it play out with Hamilton in 26, and then they'll get to the end of his contract and make a call on whether it's Bearman. And then for Bearman's sake, he's just getting it together. He's developing very nicely. A fourth followed by a sixth. I think he was unlucky in qualifying. He'd shown great pace, could have been more in qualifying actually. He just got to the last set of tyres on Q3 on Saturday afternoon, and he said that set wasn't there, so could have been a bit more than that. But he's really getting it together. Impressive weekend. Another one from Ollie Bearman.
Can we have a shout out for Haas as a team too? Because as we discovered from that interview between Martin and Ollie as we went into, I think it was the sprint on Saturday, they're now 2 points behind your old team Aston Martin, Bernie. 2 points behind a team, a burgeoning team, an expanding team, a huge team in terms of how much they've got at their disposal. And that's an amazing achievement considering they're about a quarter of the size of any of the others on track. So well done, Ai Komatsu, and well done everybody involved there.
Yeah, I think you can see the change in the team with Io being there. You can see much more discipline, much more engineering focused on the decisions that they're making, how they're setting a car up, like how they're bringing upgrades. Even I think Io has made a big difference there. So they are on his team on the up and up, and you get that impression just when you're walking by the garage in the pit lane. You know they're quite together and collected. So I don't see any reason why it should continue.
There was a Haas upgrade, to be fair to Aston Martin. There was a Haas upgrade in, was it Austin or Mexico? It was Austin, wasn't it?
I thought they brought one here. Have they not brought one here?
No, it was. Do you remember there was 4 or 5 or 6 things. I think it was Austin because it was a race that I was at. Okay. And they brought a big upgrade Haas at Austin. And Alonso and Stroll, of course, have been quite clear about this. Aston has not been touched, and since at least just before the summer. Yeah. So yeah.
It shows you the importance, though, doesn't it? To a team of their size, when you are in the fight, when you've got a season where you're in the fight and you know that there's literally tenths of seconds, Bernie, separating you from being, let's say, having a very decent starting position in a qualifying championship or being a lot further down. This is really important stuff for them. And they're now, 12 points off RB. If they could finish 6th, imagine, just because they've got some late season upgrades, how much that's worth to a team like Haas compared to somebody like Aston Martin. This is not pocket change.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying, Simon, is right there. Like Q1 is so tight. Getting out of Q1 is very difficult for someone in the midfield team. It's the one where if you're trying to get everything out of the car, traffic needs to be perfect, tires need to be perfect, position needs to be perfect, all these things need to really come together. And just a small difference, a tenth of a second, that makes a difference in Q1 being a real struggle, and then just being able to a little bit easier through Q1, a little bit easier through Q2. And then it gets infinite. Qualifying seems to get easier when you're in those positions rather than more difficult, because suddenly you've got more room on track, you've got more scope for the traffic, you've got more scope with the tires. All these things just settle down almost. Qualifying seems to go sometimes the other way. And that's what making the difference to the points at the end of the race weekend. And as well as that, I think, yes, there's a big regulation change next year. But while a bit like what we've seen with Red Bull this year, unless you really understand why your car is not good this year, how can you guarantee it's going to roll out in a good position next year? I know that aerodynamic regulations are changing, the engine's changing quite a lot, but fundamentally car physics and aerodynamics are not changing. So if you do not understand your car this year, maybe Aston do, and they're just saying, okay, we fully understand what's going wrong, we're not going to be in the same boat next year, park it. Obviously they've got Adrian on board. But if any learning you could take this year is still learning for next year. It's
even
still
with
learning.
Bernie, even with the movable wings, even with all of that, the
because
difference.
if you have a floor that's not working, a wing that's not working, some simulation tool that's not giving you the right answer, how do you not carry that forward into next year? I think you have to get on top of why your tools are telling you an upgrade should be working this year and it isn't working. And then you add the movable wings on top of that. Whereas if you had the movable wings on a car that's already not working in the wind tunnel, where is it going wrong? And I know aerodynamicist, so I'm happy for someone to write in and tell me that I'm talking absolute rubbish there.
Well, who are we to argue? God.
But the question I had about next year's aero was that because they're abandoning this this move to the ground effect aero and they're going back to the cars that we had 2022. No, they changed it in 2022, didn't they?
Yeah, 21. Yeah,
end of 21 with the rake, where a bit of rake is very nice. Thank you very much. Wasn't the sort of king of rake and understanding that Adrian Newey really, and so maybe that will help.
He was the king of ground effects as well.
Well, that's true.
He's the king.
Yes.
So
yes, he is the king.
All hail the king.
All hail the king. But I'm wondering how much some teams will think, well, listen, we never got on top of the ground effect. Thank heavens it's gone. Let's get back to the stepped bottom cars and that we understand, and then we'll worry about the movable front wings and rear wings later.
Outwash. Y250.
Yay, Y250.
Oh, I've missed that. The Y250. Literally rubbing my knees at the thought of it. Is that coming back, Bernie? I mean, it's never gone away, the Y250. Let's get into basic aero. I love it.
I'm hoping for a podcast with just you explaining Y250 vortexes to the entire team.
Of all the vortexes, it is the greatest. Is that right?
It is. But
vortices of all the vortices, it is.
But it will obviously be changing because the front wings are going to be going like that, and then it will change. It will change its dynamic vorticity.
Yeah, I need to get my aero book out. Study some air again. Study the wind.
Lazenby.
Are we going to finish on that? I mean, is there anything else to talk about? There is Gabby Bortoletto in tears in front of his whole family. I felt for him on a weekend like that. Can we? Well, I'm sorry to finish on a low, but we should probably mention that it was a real shame for him. Glad that he walked away from that crash, Bernie, because that one was airborne. It was horrible.
That looked horrendous from home. It was to see him clip the inside of turn one and then basically have no stopping power. Nothing was in contact with the ground, and that's what makes it so fast. Then when he hits the outside of turn one, is the fact that nothing is breaking. There's no friction between the car and the ground, really. So it's quite a big impact there when he hits the outside of turn one. So yeah, fantastic. Can't speak highly enough about the safety regulations that we currently work within. So let's go loop back around and say, obviously some regulations are very, very powerful and get the sport to the position that it's in today. But yeah, it's an unfortunate home Grand Prix. I'm sure he was looking forward to that one all year. And then it doesn't quite pan out in any way that he would like. And I always feel desperately sorry for the family members that are in the garage as the TV's all panned to them, and that the TV's on you for all the wrong reasons, and you have to try and gauge your reaction to that. That must be pretty awful situation.
It'll be all experience, won't it, for Gabriel Bortoletto? He's got a long career ahead in Formula One. He will not forget his first home Grand Prix that couldn't have gone worse. And, ironic, I said it at the time, apart from Charles Leclerc, the only two people who didn't finish not the Brazilian Grand Prix were the two Brazilians. So, yeah.
Two Brazilians?
Lewis Hamilton.
Come on.
Oh, God.
Keep up. Just as well I explained it on the air.
As well you did, yeah.
Brazilian
honorary
passport.
Citizen.
Yeah, dual citizens. Yay for the dual citizens.
Well, you're Irish, aren't you?
We're both Irish. You're on a podcast with two Irish citizens.
Two dual citizens.
Ted has got an Irish passport.
I'm an Irish citizen. Anyway, but bad luck to them, and well done to Liam Lawson and Isaac Hadjar. Some good points for them. And I'd like to reserve a final honourable mention for Pierre the Gazman Gasly starting the weekend, having been put in a bit of a sticky situation over a marriage proposal from Charles Leclerc in a press conference, saying, "Go on, Pierre. You and Kika, you're next." And I don't know whether it's going to be Pierre. It's like, well, yeah, I will. Or Kika thinking, whoa, hang on there, we're still young. I don't know. But, comes through and scores 8th in the sprint for 1 point and 10th in the Grand Prix for 1 point. And who would have thought Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz at Williams would have been finishing behind an Alpine in both those events. So, not great for Williams, but well done to Pierre Gasly and Alpine.
And a final word to say congratulations on a fine career to Jenson Button, by the way, who had his last professional race in Bahrain in his Cadillac in the WEC at the weekend. JB now joins us as... No, we're not retired. We're working, aren't we? Just working. He's just he's retired from his racing career. So we will see JB in a fortnight's time in Las Vegas. Bernie, rest of the day in store for you. You're going to do a big data presentation.
A big data presentation at Silverstone. So we're better to do it. And then I'll be in Vegas as well.
Yes, I heard that. Late edition. Welcome.
Late edition.
Welcome back.
If I can get my passport, visa, dual citizenship all sorted out, then I will be in Vegas.
Yeah, and do not get stuck in Lisbon, as I did. Not that you were going by Lisbon, but as I said, it's pretty good fun. Thanks, Ted.
Great. I'm going to have a big data presentation of a nap later. having fallen asleep 3 times on my journey home, one in front of Crofty while he was talking to me.
No way.
Yes, so he was.
That's impossible. That's got to be a world first.
We were in the departure lounge, and it was approaching 11 p.m. when our flight was about to take off, and he was talking, and I just I drifted off. So I fell asleep in front of Crofty. Crofty then went and talked to some people from Formula One management instead, and then I woke up and was like, "Oh, it's time to get our flight." Immediately the plane took off, obviously slightly hypoxic. Then I fell asleep again, woke up in Madrid, then fell asleep on the Madrid to London leg as well, and so slept that one away. So yeah, it's been quite catching up on sleep, because even though it was only a 3-hour time difference, I never got onto it in Brazil. I was still waking up at 5 a.m., which was 8 a.m. in the UK, and then we were working until late as well. So yeah,
nothing to do with all that sugar in the caipirinhas, eh? Nothing to do with all that sugar in the caipirinhas. All right, nice one, Bernie. Thanks, Ted. We'll see you in Vegas in a fortnight's time. But from us all here at the F1 Show, ta-ta. Have a nice day.